Opening scene, a dimly lit newsroom. A reporter shuffling papers, narrator. In a world where power thrives in shadows, where justice is often bought and sold, one story emerges that could shake the very foundations of the system. This is that story. Sound of a ticking clock. Echoing footsteps in an empty hallway, narrator. Meet Karoline Leavitt, a journalist with a relentless drive for the truth. When she stumbles upon a legal case involving the world's most influential tech mogul, Elon Musk, she has no idea that she's about to uncover a scandal that runs deeper than she ever imagined. Scene shift. A courtroom filled with murmurs and tension. Judge Langford. Overruled. The defense's request is denied. Defense Attorney Greer. Your Honor, this is a clear violation of legal procedure. We have a right to Judge Langford. I said overruled. Move on. Narrator. Something wasn't right. Every decision, every ruling stacked against Musk. But why? Who was pulling the strings behind the scenes? Sound effect. A keyboard clicking rapidly. Investigative music builds. Karoline Leavitt. Let's see what you're hiding. Judge Langford. Sound effect. A ping of a received email, followed by a sharp intake of breath, narrator. And there it was, a financial trail leading straight to the judge's bank account, a hidden trust fund, offshore accounts, and transactions linked to some of the most powerful corporate entities in the country. Scene shift. A quiet conversation in a dark cafe. Whistleblower. You're looking in the right place, Karoline, but be careful. They don't like it when people dig too deep. Karoline Leavitt. I don't scare easily. What else do you have? Whistleblower. Check Langford's travel records. Late 2023. He wasn't vacationing in Mexico. He was securing a deal. Sound effect. Pages flipping. Scribbling notes, narrator. As Karoline followed the trail, the picture became clear. Judge Langford wasn't just biased. He was bought. Scene shift. A newsroom preparing for a live broadcast. News anchor. Breaking news tonight. Explosive allegations against Judge Bernard Langford. Leaked emails and financial records suggest a conspiracy aimed at taking down Elon Musk. We go now to investigative reporter Karoline Leavitt. Sound effect. Cameras flashing. A microphone crackles to life. Karoline Leavitt. What we have here isn't just a case of courtroom misconduct. This is corruption at the highest level. Judge Langford was accepting financial incentives to manipulate rulings, ensuring Musk never had a chance at a fair trial. And we have the proof. Sound effect. Gasps from a live audience. News alerts beeping, narrator. The revelation sent shockwaves through the nation. Social media exploded. Protests erupted. Even those who opposed Musk couldn't ignore the blatant corruption. Scene shift. The courtroom. Tension at its peak. Defense Attorney Greer. Your Honor, we have new evidence that directly implicates you in judicial misconduct. Are you denying a motion to introduce evidence against yourself? Sound effect. Silence. Except for the distant ticking of a clock. Judge Langford. This is absurd. Narrator. But the walls were closing in. And then the moment that changed everything. Sound effect. Courtroom doors bursting open. Heavy footsteps approaching. Federal investigator. Judge Langford. Step down from the bench immediately. You are under investigation for bribery, judicial misconduct, and obstruction of justice. Sound effect. A gavel slipping from the judge's hand. Hitting the floor with a loud thud, narrator. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Attorneys whispered frantically. Journalists scrambled for their phones. And Musk just leaned back in his chair, watching it all unfold. Sound effect. A flurry of camera shutters. News reporters speaking over each other, narrator. But the story wasn't over, because corruption doesn't operate in isolation. Karoline Leavitt wasn't done yet. Sound effect. Another keyboard clicking. More research unfolding. Karoline Leavitt. Langford wasn't the only judge on the payroll. Forsyth wasn't just any lawyer, he was a fixer. This entire system It's been rigged for years, and I have the proof. Sound effect. Another news alert beeping news anchor. New revelations tonight. What started as a single case against Elon Musk has unraveled into one of the biggest judicial corruption scandals in modern history. Scene shift. Musk in an interview. Calm but resolute Elon Musk. This wasn't just about me. This was about the people who believe they can manipulate the system without consequences. Karoline Leavitt proved them wrong. Sound effect. Applause. Growing cheers in the background. Narrator. And that was a lesson. Corruption thrives in darkness, but when you shine a light on it, it crumbles. The truth isn't always convenient. It isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. Sound effect. Dramatic closing music. Fading to silence. Narrator. If you believe in exposing the truth, in holding power accountable, don't just watch. Speak up. Share the story. Because the more we look, the more we find. And the truth always matters. Sound effect. A final. Echoing gavel bang as the story fades to black. 2030. The courtroom buzzed with energy. The weight of the revelations still settling over everyone present. Musk leaned back in his chair, watching as the prosecution scrambled, their foundation crumbling beneath them. The federal investigator stood firm, her gaze unwavering as she addressed the court. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have witnessed today is a turning point. A sitting judge, a man entrusted with upholding the law, has been exposed as a pawn in a grander scheme of corporate manipulation and judicial fraud. This does not end here. 2105. Reporters outside the courthouse were already broadcasting the breaking news to millions across the country. Hashtags like hashtag judicial corruption and hashtag must trial scandal trended globally within minutes. Leavitt sat in the press gallery, her phone buzzing nonstop. She had known the story would be big, but even she hadn't anticipated the sheer magnitude of the public response. The people were outraged, and the calls for justice were deafening. 2140, meanwhile, in a dimly lit office far from the chaos, another conversation was unfolding. A shadowy figure, known only to the highest echelons of power, tapped a finger against a mahogany desk. Langford was careless. He muttered, "We should have anticipated Leavitt's involvement." A second voice, rough and gravelly, responded, "She got lucky, but luck runs out. We still have control in other places." Musk won this round, but the game isn't over. 2215, back in the courthouse, the investigator issued a final statement, effective immediately. All rulings made by Judge Langford in this trial are void. The case against Elon Musk is dismissed, and further investigations into corporate interference within the judicial system are underway. 2245, a roar of applause erupted from Musk supporters. The billionaire himself remained composed, though a glimmer of triumph danced in his eyes. He turned to Greer. "I think we just made history." Greer smirked. "We?" Leavitt did most of the heavy lifting. Musk nodded. "Then let's make sure she knows it." 2310, outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, chanting Leavitt's name. The journalists emerged with a storm of flashing cameras and outstretched microphones. "Ms. Leavitt, did you expect this outcome?" one reporter shouted. Leavitt adjusted the strap of her bag, her expression steady. "I expected the truth to come out. Everything else is just a bonus." 2345, just then, her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Leavitt." A low voice came through the line. "You think you've won? This is bigger than Musk. Bigger than Langford. You just kicked a hornet's nest. Be careful where you step next." Leavitt's grip on the phone tightened. "Good. Let them come." She ended the call, exhaling slowly. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. 2400 hours 20. The Department of Justice wasted no time, launching a full-scale investigation into Langford's dealings. Forsyth, the disgraced prosecution attorney, was detained for questioning, while other judges and legal figures suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. One by one, cracks began forming in the once impenetrable facade of the corrupt judicial network. 2400 hours 50. Meanwhile, Musk returned to his office, greeted by a standing ovation from his employees. But instead of reveling in victory, he turned to his senior staff. "We need to stay ahead. This trial exposed the problem. But we need to start working on the solution. There are more Langfords out there, more Forsyths. We need to change the game." 25:20. Across the city, Leavitt sat at her desk, staring at the file spread before her. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered. The Musk trial was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a puzzle that led all the way to the highest seats of power. She opened a fresh notebook and wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Who's next? 25:50. As the sun set on the most explosive legal scandal of the decade. One thing was clear. This was far from over. The truth had been exposed. But the battle for justice was only beginning. And for those who thought they could manipulate the system without consequence, a chilling realization settled in. The world was watching, and the game had changed forever. 26:30. The camera panned over the courthouse steps as the doors swung open. More officials, more investigators, more eyes now scrutinizing the system that had, for too long, gone unchecked, and somewhere, in the depths of a secure server, encrypted files waited to be discovered, files that could shake the foundation of power yet again. 27:00. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The script continues with heightened tension, intricate dialogues, and dramatic revelations. The stakes escalate as more secrets unravel, alliances shift, and power dynamics change. Scene opens in a dimly lit chamber, shadows stretching across the walls. Narrator, as the world held its breath, the pieces were still in motion. What had begun as a legal battle had transformed into a high-stakes game of survival. Would the truth be enough to bring down the corrupt elite? Or was this just another chapter in a war that had been raging behind closed doors for decades? Cut to Musk and Greer in a discreet meeting. Greer, leaning forward, voice low, "We have the upper hand now. But it won't last. They're already working on damage control." Musk smirks, but eyes sharp, "Then we hit them harder. Leavitt's investigation opened the floodgates. We make sure no one can close them again." Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt is in an underground newsroom, working tirelessly with her cybersecurity expert, Ethan Vaughn. Ethan, frowning at his screen, they're wiping records, deleting files, but not fast enough. I managed to intercept something big. Emails, transaction logs, direct links to politicians. Karoline, eyes widening. This isn't just about one judge. It's a network. Cut to a high-rise corporate office where Philip Grayson, the power broker behind the corruption, watches the news unfold. Grayson, grimacing, turning to an assistant. "Shut it down. Bury Leavitt in lawsuits. Discredit the evidence. If it spreads, we all burn." Assistant nervously nods. "Yes, sir." Back in court, the walls continue closing in on Judge Langford and Forsyth. The federal investigator now has an airtight case. But the question remains, who else will fall? The courtroom was in complete disarray. Journalists scrambled to report the breaking news. Cameras flashed, and whispers turned into frantic conversations. The judge had just abandoned his post. And now the entire legal system was under a microscope. Russell Greer turned to Musk, who remained seated, arms folded, watching the chaos unfold with an amused glint in his eyes. "Well, that was unexpected," Greer muttered. Musk smirked. "Not really. Corruption only works in the dark. Shine a light on it, and it panics." Meanwhile, Forsyth was still seated at the prosecution's table, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the desk. The court bailiff repeated his instruction. "Mr. Forsyth, you are to remain in the courthouse for questioning." Forsyth exhaled sharply and nodded, his expression defeated. He had no escape. The walls were closing in. At that moment, Karoline Leavitt stepped into the courtroom. All eyes turned to her. She was the woman who had broken the story wide open, the journalist who had dared to expose the truth. Greer noticed her and motioned for Musk to look. "There's your real MVP." Musk nodded in agreement. She deserved the credit. Leavitt met their gaze and gave a slight nod. She had done her job. But she wasn't done yet. There were still questions to answer, more layers to peel back. The corruption in this case was only the beginning. Outside the courthouse, a storm of reporters and protesters gathered, demanding justice. The Department of Justice had already announced an official inquiry, and calls for judicial reform grew louder by the second. Then, the next bombshell dropped. Another judge was implicated in a similar bribery scheme, and Leavitt wasted no time exposing the deeper network at play. More emails leaked, more evidence surfaced, and suddenly, the entire judicial system was under the harshest scrutiny it had seen in decades. Musk, now free from the lawsuit, addressed the media briefly. "This case wasn't just about me. It was about accountability. If we don't fight back against corruption, we let it control us." The scandal rippled through the corporate and legal world like an earthquake. Prominent figures resigned, investigations launched, and the people, they had finally seen the system for what it was, and they were ready to change it. Karoline Leavitt didn't stop there. She continued digging, continued exposing, and continued proving that the truth always finds a way to the surface. And for once, the world was listening. As the courtroom erupted into chaos, reporters scrambled to capture every reaction. Karoline Leavitt stood at the center of the media frenzy, her phone buzzing with calls from major news networks. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a seismic event that threatened to shake the very foundations of the judicial system. Meanwhile, inside the courthouse, Musk and his legal team remained seated, watching the unraveling disaster with quiet intensity. Forsyth, now visibly sweating, reached for his briefcase as if searching for an escape plan. But there was none. Judge Langford's chambers were no longer his refuge. Federal agents had already moved in, seizing documents and hard drives. The moment his ties to offshore accounts had been exposed, his fate had been sealed. The gavel that once held authority now felt like dead weight in his trembling hands. In a last-ditch effort, Forsyth stood up. "Your Honor, I move to have his trial dismissed immediately," he blurted out, his voice cracking with desperation. But there was no longer a judge to answer him. The federal investigator, still standing at the front of the courtroom, turned her icy gaze toward Forsyth. "Mr. Forsyth, you are now under investigation as well. We suggest you remain seated." The silence that followed was deafening. Musk finally leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the table. "So, does this mean I win?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with amusement. His attorney, Greer, chuckled. "I'd say you've done more than win." As Forsyth slumped back into his chair, his career in shambles, Karoline Leavitt stepped in front of the cameras outside the courthouse. "This isn't just about Elon Musk," she declared. "This is about exposing corruption at the highest levels. Judge Langford was only the beginning. The real question now is, who else is part of this?" The scandal had only begun to unfold, and the hunt for the truth was far from over. One thing was certain. The powerful forces that once controlled the courtroom were now the ones on trial. Scene opens in a dimly lit newsroom. Papers are scattered across the desk. A digital clock blinks. 2:37 a.m. The air is thick with urgency. Narrator voiceover. Serious tone tonight. We bring you a story so explosive it threatens to shake the very foundations of our legal system. A story of deception, greed, and power plays hidden in plain sight until now. Cut to a courtroom. The camera focusing on Judge Bernard Langford. His gavel clenched tightly, his face pale. Narrator, for months, Elon Musk thought he was fighting a straightforward lawsuit, corporate rivals accusing him of fraudulent business practices. But what if the case was never meant to be fair? What if the scales of justice had been rigged from the start? Flashback to the trial's early days. Musk's lawyer, Russell Greer, stands, objecting. Russell Greer, objection. Your Honor, the prosecution is making baseless claims with no supporting evidence. Judge Langford, without looking up, overruled. Narrator, 1 ruling. 2 rulings. 3. Every single decision tilted against Musk. The prosecution had free rein, while Musk's team hit a wall at every turn. It wasn't just bad luck. It was something deeper. Cut to investigative journalist Karoline Leavitt hunched over a laptop, scrolling through financial records, her eyes narrowing. Narrator. Then came Karoline Leavitt, a journalist who doesn't take no for an answer. When the case started making headlines, something didn't sit right with her. A judge with a perfect record? A prosecution team tied to Musk's fiercest corporate rivals? She had seen enough to know, when things seem too clean, they're usually dirty. Screen flashes with documents, offshore bank transactions, travel logs. Narrator, then she found it. A trust fund linked to Langford, receiving mysterious deposits, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right before the case was assigned to him. And where was Judge Langford 6 months ago? Cancun, a private business retreat attended by executives who stood to gain if Musk lost. But proof? That was the missing piece. Cut to a shadowy figure sending an encrypted email. Narrator, then a whistleblower, a former legal clerk who had worked under Langford. The message was clear. Check his travel records. Late 2023. He wasn't there for vacation. Screen flashes to Langford stepping off a private jet, his face hidden beneath sunglasses. Narrator. She ran the records. And there it was, his flight, paid for by the very people who wanted Musk taken down. The walls were closing in. Cut to Leavitt on a phone call. Ethan Vaughn, cybersecurity expert. Tense whisper Karoline. This isn't just one case. Langford is part of something bigger. He's not the only judge on payroll. Cut to Leavitt's shocked expression. Narrator. Then came the bombshell. Leaked emails between Langford and a corporate lobbyist, Philip Grayson. One message stood out. The deal is simple. Rule in favor of Forsyth's clients. Your retirement fund will take care of itself. Cut to Leavitt live on national television, eyes burning with intensity. Karoline Leavitt, this isn't courtroom bias. This is corruption at the highest level. We have proof that Judge Bernard Langford accepted bribes to rig the case against Elon Musk. Cut to the courtroom. The moment of reckoning. Narrator. Then, the moment Musk had been waiting for. His attorney, Russell Greer, stood with newfound confidence. Russell Greer, Your Honor, before we proceed, I'd like to submit urgent new evidence into the record. Judge Langford clears throat, voice unsteady denied. Russell Greer, the evidence is regarding your financial ties to the prosecution's backers. Are you denying a motion to introduce evidence against yourself? A ripple of shock through the courtroom. Forsyth, the prosecution's lead attorney, shifts in his seat, his face pale. Narrator, Langford's hands trembled. He gripped the gavel. But this time, it gave him no power. Cut to the courtroom doors bursting open. A federal investigator strides in. Federal investigator, Judge Langford, step down from the bench. You are under federal investigation for judicial misconduct, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Silence. Then, chaos. Narrator, the trial was over. But the fallout? That was just beginning. Cut to news reports. Headlines flashing across the screen. Judge caught in bribery scandal. FBI opens investigation into Musk trial. Judicial system in crisis. Who else is compromised? Narrator. Langford vanished from public sight. Reportedly seeking legal counsel. Forsyth, the prosecution's attorney, tried to deny involvement, but the floodgates had opened. Karoline Leavitt's next report exposed an entire network of judges and lawyers working in the shadows, ensuring verdicts favored those who paid the most. Cut to mass protests. Citizens holding signs. Justice for sale must end. Narrator. Public outrage exploded. The Department of Justice launched a full-scale investigation into judicial corruption, one of the largest in modern history. Cut to Musk in an interview, looking contemplative. Elon Musk, this was never just about me. The people who rigged the system assume no one will fight back. Karoline proved them wrong. Cut to Leavitt at her desk, typing another report. Narrator, because in the end, corruption thrives in the dark. It depends on silence, on fear. But when you shine a light on it, when you refuse to back down, it crumbles. Screen fades black. With one final message. The truth isn't always convenient. It's not always easy, but it's always worth fighting for.